pay for performance, right? That's how banking has to work.
Absolutely.
It can't work in any other way.
Absolutely. And certainly in Europe, regulation requires that that is so. So we need to define very clearly what the objectives are, measure them at the end of the year, or if it's a longer period, at the end of that longer period. And then the payment schedule is quite deferred. So in my particular case, for example, 60% of that bonus is paid over time, over a period of 5 years.
One of the problems now, though, is that your goals and objectives are changing. I mean, it used to be straightforward, deliver us a profit, a return to shareholders, and that will be great. But the stakeholders are now looking for different goals and objectives, some of them to do with ESG targets. Yes. How are you negotiating that?
Well, we have had for 7 years now, since 2015, in our metrics that define the variable compensation, we have had non-financial metrics included, some of which are customer satisfaction, our NPS in particular, the Net Promoter Score, so how our customers rate us, which is a very important part of our mission to deliver good service. Also the attrition rate of the customers, and as well we are increasingly adding other metrics that have to do with sustainability decarbonization.
I see that as a positive. I've got to be honest. I know too many bankers who are paid because they scout the clients, they trade against the clients, they traded most aggressively they could on profitability in the short term, which increased the risk for the banks and put the risk managers and the management under pressure. I actually applaud the fact that there are different metrics now as well. But is this making banking less effective financially, though, is I guess what I'm asking?
Not at all. I think there is good alignment between those non-financial metrics and our strategic objectives. I just mentioned customer satisfaction. That is very clear. If we can have a business in which customers stick with us, then we will have more profit longer term. It'll be a more sustainable business. On the sustainability side, we view sustainability as a big opportunity, certainly as a challenge for the world to decarbonize, because we need to do everything that we're doing today without emissions, but that will require so much investment. That will bring a lot of business along. So there is big alignment. And we, for example, already have had for this past year sustainable finance as one of the metrics. And we are clearly gaining a lot of business because of having that focus.
Let's move back to banking itself in terms of the environment at the moment. What is the environment like in Europe? Europe trades, your bank trades, the rest of the sector trades at a still a solid discount to the US as well. And that's reflected in the economic fundamentals, the growth trajectory, the lending data, the liquidity in the market as well. But do you feel that we're turning a corner on European banking at the moment, or actually things set to be still tough in 2023?
Remember, we have been for almost a decade with very low negative rates. So the normalization of the rate environment certainly will be something that will be supporting European banks. And we have seen a bit of that in the stock price rally that has happened over the last year, and including the recent weeks as well. There was some concern regarding whether that would bring along, and we talked about this in May, more NPLs, more cost of risk. Yeah. That is not materializing, and we're now seeing a scenario which is more benign than what many anticipated. So the data is coming in better than maybe a month ago would have been the expectation. What I have found in Davos is people are more optimistic than I think they would have been 1 month ago. And that's because the data is coming in better. Inflation seems to be coming down faster than people thought on the energy side, for sure. Some commodities, the jobs market strong. That's all true in Spain in particular as well. But we need to be cautious because inflation tends to be sticky, and we need to see whether the second round effects change this more optimistic view that people seem to have now. Also, the rate hikes have a lag effect on demand, and we also need to see how that plays out. China reopening might be inflationary. It's good news, of course, but it might be inflationary. So, good sentiment, but still not out of the tunnel.
Is there a problem as well with Europe around regulatory uncertainty? And I know, the Spanish government has introduced new taxes on the banking sector. We still don't have capital markets union. We still don't have banking union. Different jurisdictions are putting different barriers in the way of their bankers. To what extent do you think that's responsible for the discount?
It could have an effect. Certainly, if we had a capital markets union, we could all be more effective at playing our role. Also because the capital rules, which were reform was needed after the great financial crisis, but it has added a lot of capital to the system, and to the extent that for banks it's a lot harder to offload exposures versus if we had a good functioning capital markets union where you could securitize, you could turn the risk over to investors who are willing to take it and who do not need to post so much capital as the banks need to have. So I think that has an effect. Also, the regulatory approach needs to be balanced, I believe, and in Europe at times the focus is too much on risk avoidance. And of course, banking is all about underwriting risk, and that's what creates economic value for society. So we need a bit of balance there. We have progressed much in managing risk in a better way and being more solid to support bad environments. At times that gets too far, stretched too far, and then that curtails economic growth. And the tax in Spain is a good example of something that is counterproductive to growth.
What about some of the other markets you operate in? To what extent are they offsetting some of the challenges in Europe? I mean, Mexico,
well, we are lucky to
Mexico is interesting, but Turkey must be quite a headache.
Yeah, but we're lucky to have leading franchises in markets that are quite attractive and that have been performing well, even with the difficulties and challenging situation that Turkey has had, high inflation, low rates. The performance of the bank there has been good, and our team is doing an incredible job. But as I was saying, we're lucky to have leading franchises in good markets and to be a digital leader. And this allows us to grow. We grew more than 11 million clients last year. We haven't published results yet for the full year. We will do it soon. And actually, I'm in the blackout period now. But if you judge by the 9-month numbers, bottom line, almost 50% increase. So good growth momentum in all of those markets.
Just final question, really. Vaguely positive or mostly positive, but I think you might have already answered this question. Is it inflation then that's your biggest concern, or actually, given the fact that rates will continue to go up and that would boost net interest margins and incomes, actually it's not necessarily a problem for you and the bank as well, or is there something else that you're mostly worried about for 2023? I
think the area of focus has been most talked about here. Short term, yes, it's inflation, and to see how the inflation dynamic plays out. That would be the area that I would be paying attention to. Also, the links of that with debt sustainability in developed markets, with rising rates, high debt levels. We need to make sure that we have the long-term debt sustainability plan in place. But I was going to mention more the decarbonization challenge. I was saying earlier, it's a big challenge, but it's a big opportunity. We need a lot of investment. Yes, we do. And that investment is only going to happen if it makes economic sense. Now, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit already. There's a lot of investment that makes economic sense in decarbonizing, for example, investments in energy efficiency, in industry, in the homes. Also, electric vehicles for certain use cases already make sense. But a lot of the investment still needs some ways to go before it makes economic sense. A lot of the innovation that is being spurred, I see a wave of innovation to invent new ways to produce steel, cement, capture CO2, store energy, or even produce it with fusion, for example. There's a lot of innovation going on, but we need to scale it up and solve the technology scalability problem and the economic scalability problem before it can be bankable. So that is, I think, the biggest challenge that we face and the biggest opportunity. And what we require is a regulatory environment that is conducive to this. So simpler rules. And in Europe, we tend to overcomplicate them. I think the US has been much faster in having a simpler approach with incentives. If we had carbon pricing, it'd be a big boost to this, and then incentives is the name of the word.